They utilized resources and pulled feathers out of hats and rabbits out of hats that they didn't think they could pull. And they got it done in the shortest amount of time that was considered impossible. We're going to need another one of these events moving forward with our crop production and grain production globally. We're really going to have to start getting into a Manhattan-style agricultural project. And it's going to require the input of everybody on this planet. It's not going to be just the ag people. You're going to have to start putting some input in there as well.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time, cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the Grand Solar Minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne.
Kansas soybeans, before the harvest, the pods are shattering. And it's interesting that the University of Louisiana is now experimenting with 10 different types of soybeans, 10 different trials on tap at the moment. That's great. That's exactly what we need to do. LSU, thank you very much for at least experimenting to try to give us some hope for our reduction in crops to shift. And I'm really curious what their new varietal strains are hardiness prepared for. I'm really curious. Because in Louisiana, even the drier conditions accelerated the harvest this year. So look for Louisiana to have bumper crop, really good quality, where the state next door to it, poor crop. That's crazy. Just a single 100, 200-mile difference is going to determine whether crops are lost or grown. It seems that every season's now for planting. We saw last spring was too wet, too cold. The soil was too cold. Of late, see, it was like 6 weeks behind on the planting. And you got to realize Nebraska, Oklahoma, and then over in Kansas, extreme drought, but over in Nebraska, too wet. That's one state that's separating those. So you see this, it seems like there's lines in our climate now, they're stagnant, they're not moving very much because it's dumping an enormous amount of rain in one place, and then you're literally 100 miles away, it's a mega drought. There's no more even seasonal rains any longer. It's either one or the other. These are epic events happening across our planet. But people are not really talking about it. Poland, the drought is so bad they got no crops, so the government is making subsidies available for the farmers who lost their crops. 3.5 million hectares, which is more than 7 million acres, no harvest. And that's just in Poland. You got to think Poland is not the Russia or the Russian Federation. It's not super giant like that. Poland is a smaller country. But when you're taking 7 million acres off production, that's a huge amount for that country. So where does it take us? What solutions can you think of at the moment? I've tried to explain how all these events are intertwining here, economy, China downturns, etc. But what solutions can you think of? Like in your own local area? Because you've seen that even 100 miles will dictate a huge difference in the climate. Massive record rains 100 miles away and a drought over to the east. So what about your local area? What can you think about to help change a crop or do something different? Maybe your grandfather, grandmother told you stories of, when they were kids, they grew this, but it doesn't grow here anymore. Has high nutritional content, easy to grow in colder weather, easier to grow in wetter weather, something like this. And some of these plants that we consider weeds or have been told they're weeds, I wonder if we can grow some of those for crops and different types of edibles. Because nature provides. And also take a look around you. What new plants have started growing these last years? If you notice, if you're outdoors enough, you might notice a new type of a flower has sprung up. You're like, whoa, I never saw that purple flower before. Or wow, I never saw that type of nettle before. It could be anything. What new is growing around your area? Or what has stopped in your area? Oh, we used to see a lot of bees. We don't see bees anymore. We used to see fireflies. We don't see fireflies anymore. Notice what's changing in your local environment. And what's the solution that could be offered for such changes? If you think it's happening just in your local area, I want to take you to our one last little place here in Middle East, because I had this story lined up for you here. Oman and Yemen. These cyclones have landed in the same place 3 times. We got pictures of camels trying to swim out of the desert flooding. I remember previously these other prior storms that had made landfall, that had those massive waterfalls coming off of areas that were desert, that were just washing away towns and villages, left thousands and thousands of new lakes from Saudi Arabia into Oman and Yemen. This would be called a greening of the desert.
And this episode's brought to you by TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds since 1974. Full range of garden seeds, microgreen seeds, sprouting seeds, wheatgrass, grain seeds, flower seeds, herb seeds, and ground cover crop. I encourage you to take a look at their website, TrueLeafMarket.com, and they even have free starter guides there for you to learn how to grow sprouts, microgreens, herbs, and wheatgrass. Use the link below and give yourself the gift of organic and heirloom seeds.
When I first started my channel, I thought we were in a 400-year event. But the more I see these massive changes across northern Africa that's becoming greener with grasslands now and what was formerly desert 5 years ago, and these massive changes here where areas are becoming greener in Oman and Yemen, these are some of the driest places on the planet. And out just completely in the outback, in the middle of nowhere, in what's called the driest, deadliest region of Saudi Arabia, now receiving rainfall, something has changed way more than just a 400-year cycle. So in my opinion, I'm actually bumping it up to a once in a 2,000-year event or a once in a 3,600-year event that we're going to experience over these next few years. So with that said, the drop-offs and the strangeness in weather and the accelerating changes that we're seeing is going to be something in the multi-millennial levels, really talking about 3,600 years of change is at our doorstep. I was also talking about Afghanistan and areas where they're getting flooding next to, get this, riverbeds that used to be next to cities that were abandoned due to lack of rainfall approximately the same time, 3,600 years ago. You got to think about the Silk Road. An enormous amount of cities were built through what's now deserts of our world. But at those times, those were green areas. They had trees, they had pasture lands, they had rivers, they had plentiful water supply, they grew crops, they existed in what is now desert. And when we go out to China in the Tarim Basin, we saw the rains return out there this year. The same thing happened. Rivers started to run along millennia abandoned structures like they did thousands of years ago. So what are the chances of these rains coming back to the deserts across northern Africa and areas it's termed the Sahel, with all-time record rains for the second year in a row, creating lakes which used to be dry, they're filling again, slightly. Areas across Oman, Yemen, and Saudi Arabia that are starting to green again due to tropical cyclones landing in the exact same spot again and again and again for the second year in a row. All-time record rains in Afghanistan that are making rivers flow that haven't been seen in thousands of years. And the same thing happening in western China, where rivers are flowing where they haven't flowed in thousands of years. So you really need to ask yourself, what are the possibilities of these so far removed points across the planet all experiencing the same events again? I'm saying clearly we're heading back into a multi-millennial event encapsulated within the 400-year cycle. Roll that out into 9 cycles and we get 3,600 years. Something like this is upon our doorstep. 5 cycles of that would be 2,000 years. What's your intuition telling you about all these changes that are occurring? What about your mind right now? Do you feel a little more frazzled or a little something, I just can't put my finger on what's going on the planet at the moment? Everything seems to be spinning and moving and nothing makes sense. And you're like, wait, something's wrong right now. Something's not right. That's your intuition. Perhaps the sun's decreased activity state is opening doors in your mind that were not once opened. Perhaps the electrical changes that we're experiencing on our earth along with the sun is also an electrical change in your body or frequency. They talk about evolutionary leaps during these times. Are you experiencing greater intuition due to changes that are happening on our sun? Are you more cognitively aware? Are you more empathetic? Do you feel different these days? And has there been an uptick in the last month that you can discernibly feel in your mind, body, and spirit? Because there seemed to have been a massive uptick in the last 30 days or 60 days. Have you felt an uptick on our planet's political systems, economic systems, weather systems, and just your mind? And if the answer is yes, you're seeing the changes, you're intuitively feeling the changes. Just like animals can feel preceding weather fronts and they can run and hide. I believe that us as a species also have these same intuitive abilities to sense these changes. This is a massive front coming toward us. Can we feel it? Were we given the power to feel for self-survival these changes coming intuitively? How many of your friends or family have said the same thing to you? I don't know, something feels a little off, but I just can't put my finger on what it is. I think we all have these intuitive abilities, but as youngsters, we're always taught that's not real. You can't, no, that's fake. Can't see that. Oh, that's garbage. It's mumbo jumbo, hocus pocus. We quit using these abilities. And now they're being reopened or forced upon you, whether you like it or not. Intuitively, listen to the signs around you. Listen to nature. I live in Asia, and we never had a dry season. It went from summer to wet season, no dry season. Even the old timers are talking about, so strange this year. So what are you noticing in your local area that's so strange this year? And I would follow your intuition because it's your own voice talking to you. It's you, your antennas tapping back into the universal flow. Ancient traditions around the world talk about you becoming more heightened in your senses during these times. Specifically, this era. Is it beginning because of changes in our sun? And are you becoming more turned on in your mind? Don't think that it's just about the food prices, or it's mind, body, and spirit. All of it combined. The preparation in your mind mentally for the changes, you know they're here. Awesome. Think of the solution. Provide value. Spiritually, are you feeling the changes? Are you able to relay or explain to others the changes that you're also feeling? Because I bet if you started a conversation with somebody, they would be feeling the exact same thing, but they just couldn't explain it. I am your host, David DuByne, Mini Ice Age Conversations, freedomslips.com, Revolution Radio, Studio A, 10 p.m. to midnight every Thursday, trying to keep you abreast of the changes and how you can prosper, thrive, and survive during the Grand Solar Minimum. The landscape of everything you've grown up knowing is shifting. It's going to continue to shift more quickly in these next 2 years than it has in the last 5. As I've stated before, the fingerprints of the Grand Solar Minimum effects on the society are threefold. First, you're going to get the loss in crops and the drive on the food prices, and everything's going to get more expensive for what you eat. Secondly, there's going to be a contraction in the economy because people spend more on food and they stop spending on other stuff. Now, this is just the history book, what I'm talking about. Look at the history books. See what happened. And there, the history is pretty good going back to the Roman Empire. Like we can find when empires rose and fell and when wars started and when, valueless money appeared and what caused it, debastements of currency. And we can trace back like the last 2,400 years pretty good. And every time we get into a Grand Solar Minimum event, it's always the same thing. And the third part of that fingerprint would be population migration. So we're seeing 2 of the 3, well, actually 3 of the 3 at the moment. So it's in play. It's going to intensify. So everything that you're experiencing, reading about, seeing that's happening at the moment is going to just speed up faster as we move through. So things that would have taken a year to manifest are going to take, months. Things that would have taken 5 years to manifest might manifest in months also. Everything is just going to get faster. De Beers, now blockchain tracking platform for their diamond authenticity and verification. It's like all the major players coming in from all facets, from finance to commodities to luxury goods, diamonds, etc., gold. Everything is being put on the blockchain. Shipping documents, in the whole gamut, tax returns, everything is being put up on the blockchain because it can't be altered. It's there as a record of what happened. Look where the big money goes. I haven't made $1 billion in my life. I have not. But people who have, when they're all going the same direction with their money, I tend to look at that because they made way more money than I have. Follow the traits, the norms, and the practices of those that are 50 or 100 times more successful than yourself. The people I try to surround myself with in my daily life that I actually physically contact with, like face-to-face, go have a coffee, have a drink, or whatever, I try to surround myself with people who are way better than myself, to learn from them, but also provide value on what I talk about in my Grand Solar Minimum and how it affects the economy and all these other things. Japanese central bank, trial blockchain statements, Singapore blockchain banks, and wherever you're looking at it, it keeps rolling back to the same thing. All the institutional money is starting to roll in. Where it flows, momentum follows. If one area contracts in a society, they want to get the gains in another part, so they're going to move that money. Now, part of this is going to be the food economy. It's not just a single place on this planet these events are happening. It's everywhere, in every continent. Hailstorms from once-in-a-lifetime haul decimating Austria, Germany, and parts of Switzerland. You see these newswire stories coming across. The forecast from organizations, wine producers, USDA, corn growers, whatever it is, fruit orchard management societies. But they don't actually have the harvest in hand when they're making these forecasts. They're predicting.
And this episode's brought to you by TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds since 1974. Full range of garden seeds, microgreen seeds, sprouting seeds, wheatgrass, grain seeds, flower seeds, herb seeds, and ground cover crop. I encourage you to take a look at their website, TrueLeafMarket.com, and they even have free starter guides there for you to learn how to grow sprouts, microgreens, herbs, and wheatgrass. Use the link below and give yourself the gift of organic and heirloom seeds.
They go out to a part of an orchard and they look through and they take a standardized random sample of an orchard. Was that the part of the orchard that wasn't damaged by the hailstorm that you're predicting these figures off of? As we move forward, you're starting to see that these rosy projections that were always put out by whatever organization seem to be at the real harvest time when it comes into the physical counting of kilograms of something, or pounds. It's less than what was forecast for the second year in a row. So with that being said, 30-year lows in wine production harvest, Northern Hemisphere. I'm really curious when the full maturity of the grapes and the full harvest and the full production, when the wineries really get down into producing the wine, what the actual numbers will be. Now these, what would be considered, really couldn't be two affected countries. Literally in the desert, how much of effect can weather systems have on desert or semi-arid production? You wouldn't think that massive floods would wipe out arid areas' agricultural production. So now they're trying to lock down parts of Africa due to some new mysterious disease sweeping goats, sheep, calves, cattle. They didn't even know what it is. They're trying to get in there to even figure out what this strange disease is. Now, India, major producer of rice and different staples. They got a lot of people living there, 1.5 billion people. They're a major producer on the planet. A lot of it's consumed internally. So this is the whole kicker here. India grows a lot of what it eats itself. They do have imports, but not on the level of China, not anywhere close. India is way more intensive in their agriculture to supply their local communities. So when you have news stories that drought-affected states, which there are several here, districts, states, etc., overall crop losses of 33%. They call it because of strained moisture stress, meaning drought affected. So these local farmers rely on their own grown stuff, their own grown produce, their own grown grains to supply them for the year, and then they on-sell the rest into the market. Now, that reversed everything. They're not going to be suppliers, and they're going to be looking for food themselves. Speaking of blockchain and technology interfacing here, Sri Lanka bringing crop insurance to rice farmers. Because what's happened in some of these lesser developed nations, when they try to cash in because of crop losses, the insurance agencies will say, no, we don't have any record of you signing up for your crop insurance. What do you mean? We don't have that. Or they'll run away and take all the paperwork with them. So when they say, hey, you guys absconded with the money, they'll say, what money? What crop insurance? Can you prove? Can you provide any papers for us? Because the agencies are holding all the paperwork. Now, see, the farmers get together and they can put this on the blockchain. So if there's anything like that happens again, they can go right over to the blockchain and it's there as long as we have electricity on the planet. Australia heading into a mega drought. If you've seen my conversation and interview with Kevin Long from thelongview.com.au, he's a regional crop forecaster, one of the best in Australia, by the way, for Southeast Australian farmers. As where an enormous amount of grain production comes out of Australia. And he is saying mega drought is going to sweep through that area, and it's going to be a prolonged 5 to 7 year event where he was saying crop production is going to go down to literally 10% of what it is now for an extended period of time just due to the lack of moisture. Prime Minister Scott Morrison announced that Australia is setting up a multi-billion-dollar fund because of the crippling drought that has forced grazers to hand feed, sell, or even shoot their livestock. They didn't talk about grain production too much there. So Australia's in the mega drought, so they can't grow enough natural forage for their animals. Milk, cheese, dairy production. Again, a lot of those farmers were hit this year, and they sold off herds due to the rising cost of just keeping the animals. A lot of people write back and say, no way, our milk prices are really, really low. And I write back and say, well, how much is your government subsidizing it? They're doing that so you don't go out to the street. Milk is like a major thing for a lot of people and across many cultures on the planet. Now back to India and Karnataka, coffee crop is going to shrink by 40% this year. So the news doesn't paint the entire full picture of what's going on. Long potatoes, 60% down. That's up in Ireland and northern England there. Czech Republic, that's where the drought stones emerged out of the Elbe River. Worst drought in history, or at least the last 150 years of history in Central Europe. I did an entire video on that. They traced these droughts back 600 years. They did it was called the Czech lands back at that time. So the Czech Republic at that time was called the Czech lands. And some researchers had pinpointed the droughts not only through written accounts, but also through proxies of river sediment and pollen count and lakes and a few other things, stalactites and how much rainfall there was around these areas. Now, the first report went back 600 years, and then they followed it up with a second set of research a year later, which went back 2,000 years. So in that same area of the Czech Republic now, formerly the Czech lands, they were able to map out these prolonged droughts through history going back 2,000 years and broken into the two segments. The way I looked at it, mapping it back, it looked like we were heading back into something in, like, say, 1780s comparatively, because you're looking at the amount of rainfall preceding it, how intense the drought was coming in, and where it's dropping off. But if you look back far enough in the timeline, because they put all these little colored markers inside there. There was brown, red, tan, and then they had blue and a few other colors in there that could color code exactly how intense was the rainfall. Was it drought? Was it a significant drought, worst drought, light drought? And you could see mapping over history, and all you had to do was really look for a matching cycle. So I was taking 10 or 20 years of time and just looking for the same pattern. So if it went 11222, I was just going back in time looking for 11222. And I found it in 1778 was the last time, and that exact same pattern was shown in the Czech lands. So think about that. If they're going back into a 300-year drought, we have just-in-time delivery today, but reduced production is reduced production. So they're going to be looking elsewhere also for food. People need to eat. You can't not eat. Now, I didn't see this article here, but follows right on Australia. The Insurance Council of Australia, I mentioned that Australia is going into a mega drought. So the Insurance Council of Australia is now designing new rules for farm income and crop insurance for primary producers in Australia. See, you knew this was going to happen. They're going to put restrictions in on what farmers can claim for insurance now or not insure them at all, because the losses are going to continue to exacerbate or increase or strengthen in intensity from this point forward. Now, if you're an insurance provider and you know that it's heading into a mega drought in Australia and farmers are signing up for drought insurance for crop losses, would you insure them knowing that next year is going to be drier and the crops are going to be less than this year? Would you insure them? If you're a business, you would say no. If you're a human with a spirit and a heart, you would say yes. But we're dealing with corporations, so the answer is no. Australia, again, they've seen these massive windstorms up in New South Wales where they lost a lot of vegetable production, etc. Australia is a major grain producer in the Southern Hemisphere, and South Africa is too. Now, just take these two instances here. Australia is going to go down to 10% of what it normally produces. And South Africa is going to go to almost zero production due to the political turmoil. Now, think about just these two producers alone are now going to be major importers. So the tables have turned where Australia might export 10 million tons of grain out to the world. Now they, in turn, are going to be looking for imports. So that's a 20 million ton reversal. So that's 20 million tons out of the world market there. And South Africa itself usually supplies inter-Africa. They're not going to be supplying anything. So not only do the countries that they supply to, they're going to be looking for alternative sources, but South Africa itself also is going to be a major importer. So you got to think about the turn of events here. That just wiped out 35 million tons off the market because the input's not going to be there, and they're going to draw from that supply, not add to it. Now what happens when we get into the very secretive Chinese numbers coming out? Now, China's very tight-lipped about their crop losses because they just don't want people to know that they don't have control over everything. And I'll tell you an interesting fact. Science fiction programs are banned in China. And you might ask, why? Why would they ban science fiction, sci-fi programs? Well, because there's another place in the universe or another planet that's not controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. And they don't even want to set the seed that there's a place outside of Communist Party control. Period. They're so controlling in nature that they control nature. They've been telling the people since 2008 that they can control the weather, and they showed during the Beijing Olympics by closing all the factories and cloud seeding, they were able to divert moisture patterns and create clear blue skies for the Olympics, that they are now weather gods themselves. Problem is, they lost 30 to 50% of their production in Heilongjiang, which is a major producer of wheat. The numbers are sketchy, and anybody who's reporting on this is being arrested in China at the moment. So the best gauge estimates are coming from all places, North Korea. So think about that. To try to weave together the crop losses in China on their wheat crop, you need to think about the crop losses that are occurring in the neighboring country of North Korea. Now, both of these countries are not forthright with anything. Completely controlled censored media, so numbers coming out are hard to come by. And reliability in those numbers is even harder to come by. So am I going to, stake my life that they've lost 30 to 50% of their wheat crop? No. 20% for sure. The numbers are too unreliable, and where are you going to get that feed from? They're arresting people for reporting on the weather in China. It's now illegal for you to spread anything on social media that hasn't already come out in the approved media. So the example was over in Sichuan province. Massive floods came through, and they had buildings washing away and just structures floating down the river and things collapsing on the riverbanks and poor quality construction. And whoa, it was a mess. Yet the news media said, oh, it was just a flood and all the well-constructed irrigation canals took care of it, and we had some problems because some trees blocked something, and it caused some floods because the trees blocked the irrigation that was so perfectly constructed. But then you see the actual real videos from people coming out in the area, and you could see that was a complete fabrication. Now, the people who posted that on social media were arrested. This is what it's coming to. Again, it's not just across social media and the Western platforms. They're going to try to control the narrative globally. And I was toying into this thought here. What we're seeing in China was allowed to happen for the last 15 to 20 years. The West let them run and develop their own internal internet, let them run and set up the parameters for censorship, control, start up the social credit score system, because I think in 5 years, the entire world's going to be that way. With the amount of chaos coming from the crop losses and the food prices and the social unrest from the economy, which weaves right back into the food, they're going to have to control the flow of information, period. And if you don't kowtow to what's being told as the narrative of being truth, they're going to do this on a global level. I really believe this is, in 5 years, the entire globe is going to be China-controlled, censored internet and media feed. Truly, I do believe that. Since they've already unveiled it in China, now it would be just more of a copy-paste across the internet. Interesting timing, how all the internet IP addresses suddenly switched. The time is too coincidental for it to be just a random happenstance.
This video is brought to you by our friends at TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds for any grow zone on our planet.